What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we are taking a look at the Shadow Priest build. So this is a build that utilizes the Void Blade along with the Life Staff. So there's a lot that kind of plays into this one. It has a ton of self-sustain. It has really good self-healing that'll play into some of the passives that we're going to be taking, but it also really kind of takes advantage of the Void Blade in this build itself. So let's go ahead and let's jump right in and let's start talking about the skills that we're going to be using. So in terms of Void Gauntlet, we're going to be using the Void Blade underneath the Annihilation tree. So this particular build really maximizes all of our close range damage, and because of that, we want to take different things that are going to help us out with that close range combat. So out in the Annihilation tree, we're going to take Void Blade. So Void Blade is essentially going to give you a blade that you can then slice with. You can do heavy attacks, which is a thrust, and you can do regular attacks, which is slashing. So from our Void Blade, it's also going to do Disintegrate on successful hits, which is going to deal 5% weapon damage per second and reducing damage absorption by 5%, stacking up to 3 times. So the Void Blade will last about 15 seconds, but if you go through and you plan everything out correctly and you have your cooldown reductions and your crits and all that fun stuff, then you're able to get your Void Blade back pretty quickly. So let's talk about some of the other nodes we have in here. So next to Void Blade, we have Keen Confidence, which is going to give you a critical chance increase while above 50% health. This is why the self-healing is really big, because we want to maintain that crit chance. Then over here we have Forsaken Pact. This is going to give you a plus 10% damage while below 50% mana. So casting Void Blade doesn't cost very much, it costs 20, but casting our other skills, Oblivion and Orb of Decay, also cost 20 and 30. So we should be pretty much low on mana from the beginning, and we should be able to take advantage of that 10% damage increase going into it, because maintaining your Void Blade doesn't cost mana, it only costs on the first cast. From there, we're going into Fortified Blade to get Fortify at start, because again, we're going to be diving into melee combat, and because of that, we need to actually increase our damage absorption as much as we can. So Fortify is a great way to do that. Then we're picking up Keen Humility, which is going to give us a plus 10% crit chance on all abilities while they're on cooldown. And then we have Oblivion. So Oblivion is our circular rift, right? So we'll be able to drop this at our feet. So here, can drop this, and it makes like this big purple circle. Anything in here is going to be damaged, but on top of that, it's also going to give us an Empower, which is going to increase our damage by 20%, and this is huge. You want to try to pair up Oblivion and Void Blade as much as possible, because this is going to play huge into being able to dish out a decent amount of damage with Void Blade. Then from there, we go down into Withering Oblivion. This is also going to cause it to increase or to inflict Weaken to any targets inside the radius, which is going to reduce their damage by 5% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Now, again, this is a really good one, because now we have Oblivion that's dropped, we have Fortify, and we're dealing decent damage with Void Blade. So we have all these protection things, right? We're protecting ourselves and we're weakening their outgoing damage. Then we have Efficient Harvest. So Harvest Essence, health drain is reduced by 50% while below 25% mana. So Harvest Essence, you cannot block with the Void Gauntlet. Instead, when you right click, you'll siphon health, and this is to restore mana. So if I do Orb of Decay and Oblivion, and then right click, you can see my mana scoot back up, and instead I sacrifice health. So what this does is it helps you, where are we at? Right here. Wait, right here. What this does is this helps you, you lose less health, right? So right now I'm losing like 720, I think is what it said. And this is going to be cut in half while you're below 25% mana, which is good. Now, the key here is you're not trying to boost your mana all the way back up to 100%. You're looking to maybe like do 1 tick, which is going to give you just enough to cast Void Blade, but also keep you under 50% mana to make your Forsaken Pact, or keep that buff rather. Then we also have Empowering Proximity. So this is going to gain Empower whenever you cast an ability within 5 meters of an enemy, increasing your damage by 10% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Now the cool thing here is Oblivion, you're going to be casting it near enemies. Orb of Decay, kind of the same thing. You're going to be casting it near enemies. We'll go over that one in a second. And Void Blade, again, casting it near enemies. So you should have 3 stacks of Empower right out of the gate, which then plays into the other Empower, which stacks. with Oblivion. And then you also have Void Blade dealing out decent damage. So based off of these things, you're going to be dealing out a decent chunk of damage right out of the gate. And then next up, we have Vicious Void, straight up, increase critical damage on Void Blade attacks, Leeching Agony. So whenever you crit, you gain health equal to 15% of the damage done, which is a pretty decent chunk, I will say. And remember, with Void Blade, if you hit an enemy in the back, it's an automatic crit. So if you dodge and then slice them in the back, whether it's a heavy attack or a light attack, you're going to get a automatic crit and you're going to get some health back. So there is a way you can kind of control this and when you get it. And then lastly is the final passive connected to Oblivion. And that's Invigorating Oblivion, which is going to give you plus 15 stamina per second for yourself and friendlies while inside the radius. This will allow you to dodge, block, do all of those things you need to do in order to stay alive and get behind the enemy to then capitalize on Leeching Agony. Then the last thing we take in this tree is Leeching Blade, and this causes your successful thrust attacks, which are your heavy attacks, to heal yourself for 5% weapon damage per disintegrate stack on the target. Now this does scale exclusively with focus, so if you want to see big chunks of this coming back, you need to dump some points into focus. But disintegrate comes from Void Blade, but also decay. Now, disintegrate does stack up to 3 times, so because of that, you can stack up to 3 times and get 15% weapon damage back as healing. And then our ultimate in Annihilation is Void Caller. So Void Caller is pretty cool. Whenever you hit something with a Void ability, which includes your basic attacks on your Void Blade, so even just basic swings, these are going to stack up. And at 6 stacks, it's going to consume all of them, and you're going to get a big AoE, 3-meter aura rather, that's going to heal you and your friendlies around you for 30% weapon damage, but it's also going to deal additional weapon damage per second to any enemy within. The healing obviously scales with focus. It lasts 5 seconds. This is actually pretty significant, I will say. This has been kind of a make or break on some of the encounters that I've been in, where I'll hit that last stack, it'll consume it, and then it'll give me some big kind of healing, and I'm able to either power through the encounter or dish out some additional damage to wipe up the enemy. So Void Caller is really cool. I like it, and I like the way it functions. Over in the Decay tree, we just have a couple that we want to pick up here. So we have Orb of Decay, which is our last skill. This is going to fire an orb that passes through enemies. It's going to deal 100% weapon damage and inflict Disintegrate, just like your Void Blade. And at max range, it's going to turn into a healing orb in return, which is going to heal 20% weapon damage per second. Now, the cool thing here is this also heals you. So when you throw Orb of Decay out and it comes back and hits you, it is going to heal you up for 20% weapon damage per second. That will scale with focus. So this is also a really good self-heal. So I usually use this to start encounters or pull enemies. If I need to, pop Void Blade or whatever, then I can drop out an Orb of Decay, pull the enemy towards me, and then start getting my Oblivion and Void Blade going. From here we have gain 5% mana per enemy hit by the orb. Then we have Slowing Orb, so this is going to slow down anything the orb hits. But they have to already be afflicted by a debuff, which is Disintegrate. So if you hit them with Void Blade, you hit them with Oblivion with Weaken, and then you use Orb of Decay, it's going to slow them, which will be another debuff that you can then take advantage of. We have Radiant Efficiency, so mana costs are reduced by 25% while above 50% mana. And then we have Refreshing Harvest, which cooldowns are reduced by 10% per second while performing Harvest Essence. So if I go out and I drop these, and then I hold on to this, you can see my cooldowns just kind of tick down a little bit faster. Not much, but enough. So that's the Void Gauntlet. Now, there might be some questions. Why did I go with the Annihilation tree versus the Decay tree? Going out into Decay tree, I like the tether, I like the abilities themselves, but it just feels like there isn't enough oomph, and it didn't really work with my playstyle. I really like the way Void Blade operates, I like the damage that I can do with it, and I also like the flexibility that I can have with it, so I decided to go that direction. Decay, I would say, is much better for off-healing. So if you want to go into kind of an off-healing spec, whether you're in a really hard dungeon or you're in OPR or war, Decay is probably where you want to go. You can remain kind of distance from everybody, and you can send out tethers, the orbs, or the essence ruptures, and this is going to off-heal quite a bit. So I would go this tree if you want healing, this tree if you want DPS. The other question is probably, why didn't I take Petrifying Scream? Petrifying Scream was okay. Going through testing, doing it in PvP, it was okay. Doing it out in PvE, again, it was okay. but for me, it didn't really bring anything to the table. Because most of the time, you know, using this, yeah, it's doing damage and it's rooting enemies, which is great. But at the same time, enemies that I've already pulled, I'm already whacking at them with this Void Blade. So it's not like I need to root them and then get away. It's really not overly useful. So I decided to go with Orb of Decay. This feels much better. I'm able to pull enemies with it. I'm able to self-heal with it as well. So that's the Void Gauntlet. Now this is obviously the main kind of spotlight of the entire build. When it comes to the Shadow Priest, we want to use the Life Staff. So the Life Staff I have set up a little bit differently because there were some pretty big updates in this most recent Into the Void patch that pretty much nerfed everything on the Life Staff, to be honest with you guys. So my point of going for the Life Staff on this build is purely for sustain healing. This is to keep me above 50% health so I can take full advantage of this increased crit chance. So before I pull, I can drop a Sacred Ground, I can throw an Orb of Protection on myself, I can beacon, like I can do all of these things and then cast them and forget. That's the whole kind of thing that I'm going for here, is cast and forget. And because I'm not holding the Life Staff and using it, you know, all of the time, I didn't take any passives that regarded like increasing your Life Staff healing while you're holding it or doing those things, because you're gonna be switching off of it. So starting from the top, I do have Absolved. I want my light attacks, my heavy attacks no longer consume mana. It's such a good passive to take. And then I have Sacred Ground, which is going to do an AoE heal. I did Holy Ground for faster stamina and mana regen, and then Blessed for more healing. Then I took Enchanted Justice, so whenever I'm hitting battle, so let's say I'm running away, or, you know, I pulled too many enemies and I pull my Life Staff out, then at least I have this where I can activate a healing aura for myself. And then we have Intensify, so whenever I hit with an enemy, a heavy attack, I gain a stacking 10% bonus to healing effectiveness. Then over in the Protector tree, I did take Orb of Protection. So shooting out a light projectile is going to grant me a nice Fortify, it's going to heal me up, and it's going to deal weapon damage if it hits an enemy. Then I have Bend Light, so I can dodge and then drop my AoE heals. Defensive Light, so if I need to get some mana back quickly, then I can flip over to my Life Staff, I can block and go that route if I don't want to sacrifice any health. So if I'm too low on health and I can't do Harvest Essence, then I can flip over my Life Staff, block, and gain mana back, which then allows me to cast Void Blade or any other skills. Protector's Touch. So my Life Staff's light and heavy attacks will give me a Fortify. This is great for opening. So if you don't want to use Orb of Decay, or if an enemy is too far and Orb of Decay will not hit them, you can start with a light or a heavy attack to get Fortify. That way you can just kind of rock those out, and then by the time they get to you, you already have your Fortify. That way you can protect yourself from that opening attack, and then open up with a Void Blade to gain your Fortified you'll actually end up using for the duration of Void Blade. Then we have Beacon. So Beacon, we're going to shoot out a light projectile that's going to deal weapon damage to enemies and then attach itself to the target and then heal everything nearby for 16% weapon damage. So again, this is a really good one. You can just cast it on the enemy. You're going to be right up in their face, so it's going to heal you and make life a lot easier. We also took Protector's Blessing, which is a node connected to Orb of Protection. So if this hits an ally, they gain recovery, which again, this is just good for that off healing, right? So if, you know, you're in kind of a situation and you need to heal up an enemy, or not an enemy, heal up an ally, then you can toss a Orb of Protection on them and you're gonna get some extra benefits. Same thing with Shared Protection. So you hit them with Orb, you're also gonna gain Fortify and Recovery. So it just helps in those situations. And lastly, we have Aegis. So when this projectile hits, it affects all allies within a certain radius. Again, off healing. We have Protector's Strength. So if you have a buff, heal for 10% more, which you should have an Empower buff. Basically through the entire encounter, you should have buffs on you. So if you do flip over to your Life Staff for some extra healing, then you're going to be able to heal for 10% more. We have Infused Light, so Beacon's area is now 50% larger. Radiance Blessing, so it lasts a little bit longer as well. And then the last two nodes we have are Spirits United, so increasing mana regen for yourself and the group by 3%, and then Glowing Focus to give you Life Staff buffs last 20% longer. So from a Life Staff perspective, this is really what I ended up with. I did kind of toy a little bit with Splash of Light. I thought it was okay, but ultimately I decided I want sustained. I don't want things I have to cast and kind of manage, so I decided to avoid this one and just go with things that I could just click and forget about and switch back to my Void Gauntlet to start doing some real damage. So those are the two weapons. Now, I did want to touch a little bit. So let's say you wanted to go outside of this kind of Shadow Priest build. I did touch on Fire Staff to give us a little bit extra DPS and damage there. So here's kind of what I ended up with here, if anybody wants to screenshot that. And then I also did some testing with the musket, which I think musket and Void Gauntlet is going to be pretty cool. I think that kind of pairing these together with the Trapper tree is going to be pretty interesting because it allows you to stick at range. So if you need to dive in and do your Void Blade, and let's say you don't kill the enemy and your Void Blade disappears, light attacks and heavy attacks on Void Gauntlet aren't exactly great. So being able to disengage by dropping a trap and then get some distance between you and the enemy, that way your Void Blade can come off cooldown. You can do that, going with Powder Burn and Sticky Bomb to deal some decent damage, considering this got buffed. So cool stuff there. I messed with the spear a little bit. I like the way this one functions, but it's bugged in PTR. So if you're trying to throw, it's not going to work for some reason. But they did buff Coup de Grace, and we have Impaler and Vault Kick as well. So between those, we're really just trying to control the battlefield. So as you go in and you open up with encounters, you can sweep, impale, Vault Kick, and then switch over to your Void Gauntlet and start dishing out some damage to knock down enemies. And then we also have the Rapier. The Rapier was okay. A lot of people have been using the Rapier in the Void Gauntlet, but I'm curious on how it's going to work in PvP and PvE encounters. It's been kind of like up in the air. I didn't like it mostly because I suck with this weapon. I'm terrible with this weapon. So being able to really take advantage of this, I think is going to be good. But for now, that's really all we got. So flipping over to our attributes, I did go all the way into intelligence, and then I split my gear between int and const. I did not go into focus at all. I did not want any off healing, self healing, any of that stuff. I wanted to go pure DPS with a very little bit of side healing that just comes from whatever 5 focus will give me. This has been just pure damage, right? And constitution wise, I wanted to make sure I at least hit 50. If I could push into 100, I would. But again, the items that they gave us were like 508 watermark, or gear score rather. So they weren't exactly amazing, but it was enough to get the gist. So you can see here, I mean, I'm not doing a ton of damage, but we understand kind of how it works, and intelligence scaling is pretty good as well. So let's actually go into my character and let's talk a little bit about, the gems that I'm using. So on my Void Gauntlet and my musket at this point in time, let me switch over to my life staff again. So I have our rally gem, so 15% damage and outgoing healing while at full health. I've been at full health quite often during my battles, whether it's an elite enemy, whether it's in PvP. Being able to have this Void Gauntlet really helps a lot, and it helps keep you topped off. So you'll be able to take advantage of that rally gem more often. Same thing with your life staff. Now you can see here on these, they don't really have like the best perks in the world. Of course I'm still playing. There we go. They don't really have the best perks in the world. So keep that in mind, that there will be lots of optimization you can do with these. Over in my armor category, I went with heavy. But again, this is kind of the same situation. I mean, you look at this one, I have reinforced skinning luck and refreshing. I have empowering splinter shot. So there's not a lot, you know, in terms of what we can do here with our muskets, our Void Gauntlets, our life staffs. A lot of the armor is just randomly rolled. So we didn't get to do too much like deep dive testing, but you get the gist of how it works. And I went, like I said, Constitution and Intelligence for these. And then these gems were pre-slotted, so Elemental Ward on those two, Wilderness Ward for that one. And then I decided to toss in Void Damage Ward because everybody's using the Void Gauntlet. That makes sense. I did a Fizz Ward, Nature Ward, and then 2 more Void Wards. So that's where we're sitting right now. And I would say as you get out there, we need to look at what perks are going to be rolling on the gear, and then we can kind of minimize and maximize as much as we possibly can. But for now, I would say these two gems are probably the best, the two rally gems. And if you don't want to go with these rally gems, you could also maybe go with a gambit, which is this one here. So if your stamina is not full, you're dishing out a decent amount of damage. You could also go with cruel, because we're going to be slowing and stunning and rooting enemies. Or you can go with opportunist if you want kind of that, you know, execute. You know, once things drop below 30% health, you get plus 20% additional damage, and that really shows. I was testing with that for quite a while, and it worked out pretty well. You could do brash if you wanted to on your life staff or your void gauntlet. It really depends on what you want, if you want that big kind of opening boost. But I feel like this kind of drops off in this build because you're not going to get the most bang for your buck. Your life staff isn't going to pump out a bunch of damage, and the void gauntlet, by the time they get to you, they're not going to be at full health, so you really lose out there as well. So I would say stick with the rally gems or gambit, and you're going to be just fine. So guys, that is it for this build. This is purely a start, right? As we go through and we figure out different weapons, we figure out different perks, different combinations, this build is going to evolve over time, but this is a good start. This is a really fun build. And the cool thing is you can get started right out of the gate. So it's not like you have to have, you know, top end, you know, gear in order to really see the benefit of it. You can get started the second you get a void gauntlet and a life staff, or a void gauntlet and a musket, and you can really just dive in and start blowing things up from level 1 if you get lucky enough to get those things. So let me know in the comment section below what y'all think about this build. But like I said, there will be future iterations. I hope everyone enjoys the Into the Void update. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.